And when I tried to stab him in the face to prove he was lying, he parried like a pro.
Hey, it's me again. It's been a while, kind of fell off the edge of the world, but I'm here now to take a look at Hawkeye, the fencing scene from it. I'm kind of excited about this. Well, I was excited when I heard that there was fencing in a Marvel show. Not one of the main movies, but still, I was excited. Uh, it got shared around the fencing community, and I took a look at it already. And yeah, let's just jump in.
So it seems you're quite the sword aficionado, Jack. Defense?
A double.
Would you say you're more an epee, foil, or saber man?
Oh, you know your stuff, little lady.
I was a two-time state champion.
I know we haven't gotten to the fencing part yet, but I just wanted to bring this up. When I first watched it, I didn't really know much about state championships. I actually didn't even know that they were a thing. I talked to someone who did know a bit about high school tournaments, and they said that the high school tournaments, or like what she's talking about, the state championships, they're actually not a whole lot to write home about. Most tournaments in at least the US and Canada are run by ratings. Ratings are they're sort of like a less accurate version of ELO ratings for chess. So it's sort of like a rough indicator of skill. Not every single tournament is fenced for ratings, but the majority of them are. But this person that I was talking to about what exactly state championships are for fencing, because I'd never heard of it before, like I said, they said that due to various regional and geographical reasons, the tournaments held that are fencing's version of championships in state for high school are usually not rated. So the events themselves end up being sort of lackluster. Apparently, not a whole lot of people show up, and a lot of the ones that do are going to any event that they can to get experience. So, not a whole lot of heavy hitters. So, it's not nothing that she apparently won 2 times state champion, but it's probably not as big of a deal as they're making it out to be. Now, again, this is all secondhand information, but it's secondhand information from someone who actually went through it all. Could be wrong, but honestly, I mean, I thought that it was made up when I first saw this episode. So that kind of tells you exactly how much hype there is around this. But I'm sort of tearing at a new one before we've even gotten to the fencing. So let's keep going.
What do you say we break out a couple of these bad boys? Got some spare fencing gear.
I'm convinced. I'm gonna go get my stuff.
Honey, be careful. When am I not careful? I was talking to Jack.
Couple things to unpack here. First of all, I don't believe this character is portrayed as a club owner or a coach. So the fact that they have enough spare equipment to outfit someone else is already kind of unusual. But technically that's not about actually fencing, so whatever. The weapon that they're doing here is saber, which is the only weapon in fencing that you can cut and thrust in. The entire upper torso is valid target area, so the torso, arms, and head are all valid. And you can cut and thrust to any of them, meaning you can score with any part of the blade. There are 2 things I want to get out of the way, but I want to get them out of the way because they're small details and they're easily explained away. First of all, they're fencing on a stone floor. Unless you're fencing really slowly, a stone floor is not a good idea to fence on. It can really destroy your feet if you do that. And the thing is, it's particularly important for saber fencers to have a good, solid, grippy surface that is somewhat shock absorbent. This is one reason why you see a lot of fencing in gyms. Now, that can be explained away by the fact that they're doing this impromptu and they probably have a lot more furniture in places with wood floors. Maybe they just chose it here because in the lore of this episode, that was the emptiest place that they had that could still work as a area. I was about to call it a strip, but I already know they're not going to be using their feet very much. There's not enough room for a strip there. Yeah. So I guess just this general area was the best that they had. The other weird thing is how this guy is standing. It's pretty funny because, first of all, his grip is a little weird, although technically not incorrect. He's not holding, his thumb is positioned correctly, his fingers are following suit, and the pommel is more or less where it's supposed to be. So he's not actually doing anything wrong. It's one of those things where it's easy to tell that someone is inexperienced with it and has only done this sort of thing for the camera because they have, technically the right position, but you can tell it's just they're not fluid with it at all. And then he comes into on guard with this sort of stance, which the thing is, this looks closer to foil or epee. In fact, I'd wager that this is closest to epee, which is a vastly different weapon than saber. And even if this was more of a foil stance, that's still not the same thing as saber. They share more in common than saber does with epee, but it's still so different. It looks like whatever fencing research that the people who made the show did, it got based off of one weapon and then they switched to another just without consulting anyone, I guess, because that's exactly what is happening here. This looks like an epee fencer who was handed a saber for the very first time in their life, after having watched no saber fencing. This is much closer to a typical saber position. And in fact, this girl, Kate Bishop, hers is a little bit better, but honestly, it's not by much. The saber guard, and in fact the types of on-guard stances between all three weapons, it's mostly defined by where the blade is held, whether or not it's in line with the arm, and exactly where it's positioned. So, yeah, this is not a proper saber stance. Please do not do this. But really, I saved the best for last. I have no idea what this is. I don't know why that arm is there. I have absolutely no idea. The thing is, something that I've noticed in modern fencing is that there are elements of it from when it was classical fencing that are still sort of within the stereotype of modern fencing as it is today, even if it's actually been gotten rid of in competition and training and stuff like that. The most notable is when fencers used to have their arm cooked up like this, like a freaking scorpion tail. That's how fencers used to do it, and you no longer see that, but occasionally in some movies and TV shows, you still see that being portrayed. So my first instinct when I saw this hand position was that it was some old classical fencing quirk or whatever that got accidentally incorporated into this modern fencing depiction. The thing is, though, I have no idea what it would have been. I've never seen that before in classical fencing, and I also see absolutely no reason for it, particularly since that's actually illegal. The only weapon that would be allowed in is an epee, because the entire body is valid target area. You still should not do it, because your uncovered hand is in the middle of a another valid target, so you don't want that to get stabbed. But in saber, this would be illegal because the hand is not covered by anything conductive, meaning even though your hand is technically part of your torso, it's not, it's actually not. Neither hand is valid target area. On an actual saber glove, you can see here it has this conductive cuff so that it covers the arm and connects basically the rest of the glove to the conductive lame, but you'll notice that the hand portion of it is not silvery. It is not covered in the lame material. So even if you hit it, it's not going to go off because no connection has been made. So neither of the hands are valid target area. So even if you weren't going to hurt yourself, which, I mean, honestly, if you keep that hand there, it's going to be hurt. Even if he moves it away during engagement distance, this is clearly like supposed to be seen as some sort of habit, and if it's a habit, it's going to crop up at a time that you're not expecting, which that's going to happen more and more the more you fence, because you're starting to pull your focus away from what your own body is doing. So, it's not a good idea, it's not an old tactic that used to be around, and it's just dumb overall, so I have no idea why it's here. But they're about to engage, so let's continue.
You are good.
So, that was a short engagement. First thing I want to point out, this girl's jacket is incomplete. It should have a groin strap which goes through the bottom of the legs and connects to the very back. It's just a safety measure. I don't know why she doesn't have one. I didn't even know people made them anymore, so I don't know why she has that. But that's a small detail. Going back to the actual fencing, there were parries. I'll give them that. It was an actual back and forth, unlike many of the things that I've seen where, they're just trying to hit each other's blades. In this case, one person is attacking and the other person is defending, and they go back and forth like that. I did like that. It showed that they actually want to try and portray fencing. Now, partially because it's saber with inexperienced people, and partially because they're trying to spice it up, everything is about 5 times as big and flashy as it needs to be. Every single attack is being made with their entire arm. They're not really cutting, they're slashing. There are differences between the two. Slashing is when you take your entire arm and basically try to punch your way through whatever obstacle your blade is meeting. In fencing, this is a very bad idea, because not only does it make not a scrap of difference how hard you hit, particularly in saber, but also because it actually makes you slower, and it delays your attack if you're winding up. And if you're using your whole arm, you're probably winding up. Also, your opponent is going to hate you for it. They'll most likely win, but they'll walk away with bruises, and then you will be remembered as that fencer. So, they're slashing, not cutting. Cutting is when you extend with the arm in a straight line, hiding the attack until the very end. When you commit to a line, you place the blade and you cut with your fingers. You only need a couple of inches. So, they're slashing, and then the parries are way too wide. This is sort of the thing that I mentioned with this guy's grip in the beginning, is technically there's nothing wrong with the parries, they're just inexperienced. But the main thing that makes this less of an actual fencing bout, and if anything more of a drill, albeit a drill that is going very poorly, is the fact that they're barely moving their feet. Saber fencers use maybe 80% footwork to their 20% blade work. Saber fencing is very, very reliant on good, solid footwork. You can dodge an opponent's attack with just footwork by making them fall short when they thought that you were within range. And adding in extra footwork whenever you are making a parry with your blade, it makes it so much more effective. So, maintaining the right distance is crucial to good fencing. And if both fencers are doing that, then that means that that is constantly changing. They are solid as a rock. They are not really moving whatsoever. So that's actually the main part of this that is unrealistic. Everything else is proper positioning that has gone way off the deep end. It's way too aggressive. They're way too excited about everything. It's very slow compared to real fencing, and it's also very inefficient. But the thing that makes this particularly unbelievable is just the fact that they're not moving. They need to be moving. Also, with how she scored with a tip, which you can do that in Saber, but it's rather uncommon. And it's very uncommon to not have the blade bend. This blade is completely straight, meaning she didn't even hit her opponent.
Go again. Oh, caught me again. Wow, you are good.
So for the second point, more of the same. Everything is technically in the right position, but it's all way too flashy, way too out there. They're squirming their torsos, which you shouldn't do. A good fencer keeps their torso upright and stable, but they're not doing that. They're trying to squirm their way out of whatever this is, because I would hesitate to call this even a drill, and I would really hesitate to call it fencing. It looks like they want to go to the side when you should want to go back. And then everything else, like, they tried to do a couple of feints with this swirling action, but I mean, it's more the slashing versus cutting argument here. That's not a feint, that's not a disengage, that is a helicopter move. This looks like two people on their maybe second or third day of practice who have been taught a handful of parries and are now off in the corner of the club just going at it as if they're being filmed. So I guess for Hollywood that's pretty accurate, but for actual fencing it's not.
Stop letting me win.
I'm not. Honest, I mean, 2-time state champ, right?
It's all happening so quickly, and yet somehow so slowly. There were two major things wrong in this. One of them I've already mentioned, which is just the wild slashing every single time. I will say, when people get frustrated and when they get tired, their form suffers. And part of that means that their attacks can become wilder and not as controlled. But it's never to this degree. The other thing is the fact that she just kept attacking over and over. Now, Saber follows the rules of priority, also known as right-of-way, meaning that only one person can attack at a time. Whoever attacks first has priority. The other fencer must then take priority if they want to score. You can either wait for them to fall short, which means that their attack is finished, or you can parry them. Before, they were parrying. They were doing a bunch of back and forth, meaning priority was, if this was an actual bout, jumping in between the two fencers. Whichever one is attacking has priority, whichever one is defending is causing them to lose priority, and so on and so forth. But in this case, her attack is missing every single time. Attack no, attack no, attack no, attack no. On the upside, we saw a little bit of footwork. On the downside, it was awful. Her feet aren't lined up, they're taking inefficient steps, they just have no real control, and their lunge, like, I can only see part of the lunge, but from what I did see, it looked awful. Proper lunge is you kick out as you drive forward with your front foot and land. It did not look like she kicked. It looked like she raised her leg, like lifted it like a dog trying to pee, and then pushed forward. and that is horrible form. And it's a good way to eventually injure yourself and maybe even fall, because there are ways to move quickly and efficiently in fencing without totally ruining your joints, particularly your knees, which are important. There was some footwork present, and I hated all of it. And she also landed with a perfectly straight blade. I don't care if you know that someone is gonna parry it. You never, ever, ever attack when someone has no mask and in particular is not looking directly at you. If they're looking directly at you and they don't have a mask, that's still not a reason to attack. What's funny though, he chose a very unconventional parry to do this. He did a parry 2, but he did it extremely high. He could have done either a parry 3, which is here, or a parry 5, which is here. I suppose the parry 5 wouldn't really have the effect of being able to fling it out of her hands. Parry 3 would have been a good choice for that. What I know for sure is that this looked like a parry 2 because of how it was positioned, but it was way out of placement. It took more effort and therefore more time to actually complete, and was probably one of the worst choices of parries. You could have even done parry 4 and it would have ended up better than that. And a 4 and a 3 actually can have the potential of moving someone's blade to the side. It shouldn't. A parry should meet the attack, not shove it. But I understand that they wanted the effect of flinging her blade out of her hand, and they could have done that with a parry 4 or a parry 3. That's my opinion on that. That is pretty much all the fencing that I've seen in this episode. When I first watched the intro, the artwork that was going on, like you see here, this is mostly épée, and here they're doing saber. And like I said, épée has the least in common with saber, so you had to either be really good or really stupid to challenge someone in a weapon that you don't honestly have that much experience with. I've seen people do tournaments with weapons that they knew in theory how to fence, but just weren't familiar enough with it. And, maybe they didn't technically do anything wrong, but they were just completely outclassed by someone who had spent time in that weapon. I don't know why they showed épée and then had saber here, although I guess it technically does explain why these two actors' forms looked closer to épée than actual saber. I don't know, maybe they meant for it to be épée and then changed it at the last second. Could be anything. For a score for this, they put effort into it, and like I said, technically some of the positions were correct, but everything else was overdramatic, and I'm going to be a little bit harsher on it because they sort of hyped her up to be an actual fencing person, and this guy hyped up to be an actual fencer, and then just fell short of the mark. I guess I would give this a 4 out of 10. Maybe a 4.5 if I was being generous. But yeah, this is... If you see this and you want to try fencing because of this episode, or even if you are a fencer and want to try saber in particular, then, that's great, but it's not going to look like this. If a coach sees you doing this, they're either going to correct you or wait for your opponent to correct you, because this kind of thing does not work. So, that's the end of that. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Bye.